Daniel carried himself like a man who had already conquered the world. To most, he was the definition of success. A luxury car waiting outside his office, his name printed across glossy business magazines, the kind of man others pointed to as proof that ambition paid off. Yet when the lights dimmed and the applause faded, Daniel returned to a silence that pressed against his chest like a weight. In the mirror of his penthouse suite, his reflection betrayed what others never saw. Tired eyes rimmed with shadows, a jaw tightened not by pride but by years of loneliness. He had money, power, respect, but he did not have someone who loved Daniel, the man, instead of Daniel, the fortune. He had tried before. Once years ago he believed in forever, but betrayal had taught him that love could be a currency, traded for status and comfort. Since then he had buried himself in work, convincing himself he was content. Still, some nights when the city lights flickered outside his window, the emptiness clawed louder. It was on one of those nights that he attended a charity gala. He told himself it was for business, another chance to shake hands and write checks, but part of him longed for something else. A spark, a glance, a reminder that he was not invisible beneath the armor of wealth. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne, and laughter that rang too hollow. Daniel stood at the edge of it all, tailored suit impeccable yet apart from the crowd. A group of businessmen toasted near him, their voices brimming with false cheer. But Daniel's gaze drifted elsewhere. He felt like an actor who had forgotten his lines. And then he saw her across the room. Elena moved with an ease that stole his attention instantly. She laughed at something a guest whispered, her eyes alive, her presence unforced in a sea of calculated performances. Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't know her story, her past, or why she was there. Only that, for the first time in years, his guard slipped. He adjusted his cufflinks, an old nervous habit, and thought, maybe fate hasn't forgotten me after all. He started toward her, unaware that this step, so small, so natural, would unravel everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and survival. Daniel approached with the measured confidence of a man used to commanding rooms. But for once, it wasn't business deals or boardroom strategies weighing on his mind. It was her. Elena turned as though she'd felt his gaze, and when their eyes met, something inside him shifted. Her smile was immediate, radiant in a way that seemed untouched by the vanity of the ballroom. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else, she teased lightly, voice warm. Daniel blinked, momentarily disarmed. Guilty, he admitted, his lips curling into a rare, genuine smile. These events are more about appearances than people. Then let's not pretend, she said, extending her hand. I'm Elena. The simplicity of it caught him off guard. Most introductions he endured came layered with expectations, job titles, connections, subtle hints at what he could offer, but Elena's eyes carried none of that weight. They carried curiosity, and it tugged at the parts of him he had long kept hidden. They spent the evening in a quiet corner of the gala, a candle-lit table shielding them from the chatter of the crowd. She asked about his interests, his travels, his favorite books, not his income, not his company's. Daniel found himself laughing, a sound that had grown foreign. Yet there were moments, fleeting but sharp, when her answers curled away from clarity. When he asked about her family, she paused too long, then shrugged. We're complicated. When he wondered what brought her to the gala, she waved it off with a vague, a friend thought I'd enjoy it. Each time, her smile returned quickly, as if to erase the shadows of her hesitation. And each time, Daniel let the unease slip past him. After all, wasn't it enough to feel alive again? To feel seen? As the night waned, Daniel realized he hadn't thought once of the lonely penthouse awaiting him. Elena's laughter filled spaces he'd believed permanently hollow. For the first time in years, he lowered his guard, his heart whispering that maybe this was the chance he had been waiting for. He didn't notice the way she glanced around the room when she thought he wasn't looking, nor how her gaze lingered. On the exits, as though she were mapping escape routes. To him. There was only Elena and her smile. A smile that was already beginning to unravel his defenses. Asterisk. The days after the gala blurred into weeks, and with each one, Daniel felt himself stepping deeper into a world that no longer seemed so empty. Elena became the rhythm of his days. Dinners in candlelit restaurants, weekend escapes to coastal resorts, long conversations that stretched late into the night. He showered her with gifts, not as currency but as proof of his affection. Jewelry. Boxes, designer dresses, little tokens of thoughtfulness appeared in her hands as if they were extensions of his heart. Elena accepted them with a soft laugh, a kiss, and always that dazzling smile that made Daniel believe she valued the man, not the money. Daniel, his friend Ethan said one evening over drinks. You've known her what? A month? Don't. You think this is moving a little fast? Daniel leaned back, swirling the amber in his glass. When something feels right, why slow it down? I've spent years building walls. She makes me want to live again. Ethan frowned. I just don't want to see you get hurt. Daniel waved the concern aside, his chest tightening at the thought. Hurt was the past. Elena was the future. What he didn't see, what he couldn't see, and were the nights Elena spent alone, when the glitter of gifts faded and she retreated into silence. In the soft glow of her bedside lamp, a notebook rested. On her nightstand, its pages were filled with neat, deliberate scribbles. Daniel's business trips, the times he left the office, what wine he preferred with dinner, how often he locked the penthouse door. Each detail was mapped with precision. When he kissed her. Good night, she kissed him back tenderly. When he spoke of his dreams, she listened with shining eyes, and yet behind those eyes, calculations flickered like quiet storms. Daniel mistook her attentiveness for devotion. He didn't notice how often she deflected questions about her own past, or how her laughter sometimes carried a practiced note. What he saw was companionship, warmth, the healing of old wounds. What she saw was opportunity. Still, he wasn't blind to whispers. Friends called her too good to be true. Employees at his company murmured that Elena's sudden presence was settling. Evnathan, loyal as ever, tried again. You've built empires, Daniel. You know how fast growth can collapse. Don't let your heart be reckless. But Daniel, starved of intimacy for so long, silenced every doubt. He wanted to believe in her. He needed to believe. And so the romance surged forward, unchecked, a fire blazing too brightly to last. Elena leaned into his trust, wrapping herself deeper into his life and his weaknesses. One evening, as Daniel slept soundly beside her, Elena flipped her notebook shut, her pen still warm from scribbling. She smiled to herself in the darkness. The game had only just begun. Asterisk. Daniel had never been a man of hesitation. In business, when opportunity appeared, he seized it. Now, with Elena, he felt that same urgency, only sharper, more fragile. He couldn't bear the thought of losing the warmth she had brought into his life. So one evening, in a private dining room bathed in golden candlelight, Daniel slid a small velvet box across the table. His hands, steady in negotiations worth millions, trembled now. Elena, he said softly, voice thick. I've lived a life full of victories, but none of them matter without someone to share them with. Will you marry me? Her hand flew to her mouth. For a heartbeat, her eyes glistened as though caught between calculation and surprise. Then, with a practiced gasp, she let tears spill freely. Yes, Daniel, she whispered, leaning forward as the ring slipped onto her finger. Forever. The diamond caught the light, scattering sparks across the room. Daniel saw eternity in those flashes. Elena saw security. Their engagement party followed weeks later, a grand affair in a luxury hotel ballroom. Friends and colleagues filled the space with laughter, champagne, and endless congratulations. Daniel stood tall, pride swelling in his chest as he introduced Elena as his fiancée. Every smile he received seemed to confirm what he already believed. He had finally found love worth trusting. Elena played her role flawlessly. Her laughter floated across the room like music. Her hand clutched his arm with effortless intimacy. Her ring gleamed under the lights as if it had always belonged there. She was perfect. Almost too perfect. And then, as she turned toward the window to greet another guest, she froze. Outside, across the glow of the parking lot, a figure lingered. A man, his shoulders hunched beneath a dark coat, his face swallowed by shadows. He stood still, watching. For the briefest moment, Elena's smile faltered. Her fingers tightened around her champagne glass, her pulse quickening. She knew that stance, that stillness. The man hadn't forgotten her. Quickly, she forced her expression back into radiance, pivoting to accept another congratulatory hug. Daniel, lost in conversation with Ethan, noticed nothing. To him, the night was flawless, unmarred by shadows. But Elena's eyes darted back to the window more than once, and every time the silhouette remained, silent, patient, waiting. Later, when the party faded and Daniel pulled her close, whispering about their future, she kissed him with devotion that looked real enough to fool anyone. Only, she knew that forever had already come back to haunt her. At first, marriage felt like a dream Daniel had longed for, but never thought he'd live. Mornings began with Elena's laughter drifting through the kitchen, evenings with her arm draped around him as they shared wine and whispered about the future. For a while, the loneliness that once haunted him seemed banished. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the sweetness began to curdle. Elena's tone shifted, wrapped in affection but sharp beneath the surface. "Darling, you really shouldn't spend so much time with Ethan," she said one night, brushing crumbs off the table. "He distracts you from what matters, from us." Daniel frowned, but she leaned in with a kiss, her voice tender. "I only want the best for you, for us to grow without noise around us." Soon Ethan's calls went unanswered. Invitations from colleagues and old friends grew fewer until they stopped altogether. Daniel told himself it was his schedule, his business, the pressure of being newly married. Yet, each time he sat alone at the dinner table, staring at an empty chair while Elena texted in the next room, unease gnawed at him. The glow from her phone lit her face in the dark, her expression unreadable. Once, he caught a glimpse of the screen before she tilted it away, the words "unknown number" glaring like a warning. Who was that? He asked casually. She didn't miss a beat. "Just a friend checking in. Nothing important." Then, with a laugh too quick, she changed the subject, drawing him back into her orbit. Daniel tried to believe her. After all, wasn't he the one who had been starved of affection for so long? Hadn't she healed parts of him that no one else could? To question her felt like betraying the gift she had given him. But when nights grew silent and he lay awake beside her, he couldn't shake the creeping sense that the walls around him were closing in. He felt smaller inside his own home. Choices narrowed, voice muted. Meanwhile, beyond his sight, Elena's past began to stir. In hushed conversations with the man in the shadows, her words were colder, stripped of the tenderness she performed for Daniel. "He's in too deep," she whispered. Into the phone, her eyes darting toward the closed bedroom door. "Give me time. He trusts me completely." The man's voice crackled faintly on the other end, low and commanding. "Don't keep me waiting." Elena ended the call and slipped back into bed, curling against Daniel as though nothing had passed. He stirred, half awake, and smiled faintly. At her touch. He didn't know the darkness she had already invited inside. The shift came quietly, like a draft slipping through a locked window. One morning, while gathering documents from his study, Daniel noticed a crumpled receipt shoved beneath a stack of papers. His name wasn't on it. Neither was his card. The purchase was from a jewelry store he had never visited. A bracelet. Expensive, bought late at night. He turned the slip of paper over in his hand, a cold knot forming in his stomach. Later that week, he heard her voice behind a closed door, hushed and hurried. "Don't call me at this hour," Elena whispered. A pause, then softer. "He'll get suspicious." When Daniel entered the room, she ended the call instantly, forcing a smile. "Just a friend from abroad, nothing important." The doubt pressed heavier now. That evening, while Elena was in the shower, Daniel scrolled through the call log on her phone. The same number repeated over and over, always at night, always saved under no name. When she emerged, towel wrapped around her hair, he confronted her. "Who's calling you, Elena? And what's this?" He held up the receipt. Her face drained, then filled with tears so fast it almost seemed rehearsed. "Daniel, no, please, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" His voice cracked, caught between fury and fear. She clutched his arm, her sobs shattering the silence. "It was supposed to be a surprise, the bracelet, for you to give me on our anniversary. I didn't want you to know, and the calls, my sister. She's going through something private. I couldn't betray her trust." The explanation was shaky, but her tears, her trembling voice, the way she collapsed against him, it all pulled at the cracks in his resolve. He wanted to believe her. He needed to slowly. His anger softened into guilt. He kissed her damp hair, murmuring apologies, telling himself he'd let suspicion poison something good. But as he drifted into uneasy sleep that night, Elena was elsewhere. Under the orange glow of a streetlight, she sat in a parked car beside the man from the shadows. Their heads leaned close, voices low and urgent. "He suspects," she muttered. The man's mouth curved into a cruel smile. "Then we move faster." The morning after her meeting in the parked car, Elena moved through the kitchen with deliberate grace. Her hands were steady as she poured wine into a glass, her face calm as though nothing had shifted between her and Daniel. But inside, her thoughts were precise, methodical. A few drops. Just enough. Untraceable. By the time Daniel arrived home, exhausted from work, the table was already set. Candlelight flickered against crystal glasses, the scent of roasted herbs filling the room. Elena greeted him with a soft kiss, slipping the glass into his hand. "To us?" she said sweetly. Daniel smiled, weary but grateful. He drank. At first nothing seemed unusual, but within days a heaviness began to creep into his body. His limbs felt sluggish, his concentration frayed. Nights brought restless sleep, mornings a pounding fatigue that coffee couldn't cure. He grew short-tempered, distracted. When Ethan called to check in, Daniel brushed him off. "Just stress. The company's been demanding lately." Ethan hesitated. "Stress doesn't make your voice sound like that, brother. You sound worn down." Daniel forced a laugh. "Marriage changes a man." But when he hung up, doubt gnawed at him. Something wasn't right. He could feel it in his bones. At dinner, Elena watched him closely as he pushed food around his plate, his appetite dwindling. "You work too hard, Daniel," she murmured, slipping her hand over his. "You need rest. Let me take care of you." Her words dripped with tenderness, but her eyes, steady, unreadable, held something colder. That night, as he lay in bed, Daniel clutched his chest when a sudden wave of nausea and tightness hit him. Elena sat up instantly, stroking his hair, whispering, "Shh, I'm here. You'll be okay." Her calmness unsettled him more than his own pain. Friends began whispering explanations. Midlife burnout, maybe depression. To them, Daniel looked like a man slowly crumbling under the pressure of success. But Daniel's instincts whispered something darker. He caught himself staring at the glass of wine on the table, the bowl of soup Elena always insisted he finish, the pills she offered when his headaches came. And when he looked at her, her beautiful, flawless face hovering above him with concern, he wondered for the first time if love could be fatal. Still, he swallowed the food she gave him, kissed the lips that might be betraying him, and closed his eyes with fear he dared not voice. The decline could no longer be disguised as stress. Daniel's body, once vigorous and disciplined, betrayed him with alarming force. One night after dinner, he staggered to his feet, clutching the edge of the table as dizziness blurred his vision. "Elena." He gasped, but the room tilted violently. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the cold marble floor. When he opened his eyes, harsh fluorescent lights pressed against him. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air, and monitors beeped rhythmically at his bedside. A hospital. His chest ached with each breath, his muscles heavy as stone. Elena sat nearby, her face sculpted in the perfect mask of worry. Her hand clutched his tightly, her eyes brimming with tears on cue. "Daniel," she whispered, "you scared me. The doctors say it's exhaustion. You need to slow down." Daniel tried to nod, but his mind churned. Exhaustion didn't explain. The sharp pains, the fog that clouded his thoughts, the strange weakness gnawing at him day by day. Something inside him screamed that he was being undone, piece by piece. The door opened, and Ethan stepped inside, his expression tight. Relief flickered in his eyes at seeing his friend awake, but suspicion quickly followed as he glanced at Elena. "How is he?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but edged. Elena answered before Daniel could. "Stable, they'll keep him overnight. Just work stress catching up to him." Ethan studied her face, then turned back to Daniel. "Brother, we've known each other since we were boys. You don't crumble from stress, something else is happening." Daniel tried to speak, but Elena tightened her grip, silencing him with a squeeze of his hand. "Don't upset him, he needs rest." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Rest isn't what he needs. Truth is, the tension in the room thickened, a silence stretched too long. Elena broke it with a shaky laugh, brushing Daniel's hair back. "He's lucky to have friends who care. We'll get through this." But Ethan didn't smile. In the shadows of the room, his suspicion deepened. He noticed the way her hand lingered on Daniel's wrist, controlling, as though claiming ownership. He noticed her flawless explanations, too rehearsed to be real. When she finally stepped out to speak with the doctors, Ethan leaned close. "Daniel, listen to me. I don't trust her, and if you're honest, neither do you." Daniel's throat tightened. For the first time, he didn't dismiss the thought. He whispered hoarse, "Ethan, what if she doesn't love me at all? What if she wants me gone?" The words tasted bitter, but they were true. He saw the shock in Ethan's eyes harden into resolve. Outside the door, Elena lingered for a moment, her expression unreadable. Her mask of concern never slipped, but in her eyes, something sharp flickered. Impatience, calculation. The game was tightening, and Daniel was finally starting to realize he might not survive it. Ethan was not a man easily fooled. Years of business alongside Daniel had taught him to read numbers, contracts, and people with equal precision. And Elena, perfect, radiant Elena, had begun to read false. He started quietly, pulling favors from old contacts, combing through public records, tracing the threads of her past. What he uncovered chilled him. Elena did not exist 10 years ago. Before that, there were fragments. An Elena Cruz in Madrid, an Elena Varga in Bucharest, Elena Torres in Lisbon. Different names, different papers, the same photograph, her face, unchanged, except for subtle differences in hair or clothing. A man's name appeared beside hers again and again. Victor Novak. Convicted fraudster, skilled in cons that drained fortunes from the naive and wealthy. He had vanished from headlines years ago. Now Ethan realized he hadn't vanished at all. He had simply found a new partner, and Daniel was their latest mark. Ethan's stomach turned as he flipped through the copies of documents his contact delivered. A stack of old passports with mismatched identities, unpaid debts, trails of vanished husbands or boyfriends who had lost everything after meeting her. That evening, Ethan sat beside Daniel in the hospital room, lowering his voice. "She's not who she says she is. I've seen the papers, Daniel. She's done this before, over and over. You're not her first. You're just her next." Daniel's throat constricted, the betrayal cutting deeper than any illness. He had wanted so badly to believe in her smile, her touch, her whispered promises of forever. Now he saw them for what they were. Tools. His voice cracked. "I let her in. I gave her everything." Ethan's eyes were grim. "Then we take it back, but you need to be careful. She'll know if you change." And Ethan was right. That night, Elena stood alone on the balcony of their penthouse, the city, lights flickering below. Her phone glowed in her hand, the words "unknown number" flashing. She answered quickly, her voice sharp, furious. He knows too much. Ethan's digging into me. If he keeps pressing, this will fall apart. Victor's voice growled through the line, impatient. Then end it now. Elena's face twisted, no longer the radiant mask she wore for Daniel. The softness drained away, leaving only cold resolve. I'll handle it, she hissed. He won't see it coming. She ended the call and slipped back inside, smoothing her features before returning to Daniel's bedside. Her hand brushed his hair, her lips pressed gently to his forehead. Rest, love, she whispered sweetly. But her mind was already racing. Toward the final act. The apartment glowed with soft candlelight, the kind of scene Daniel once believed was love. The table was dressed in perfection, red wine breathing in crystal glasses, roasted lamb carved neatly on porcelain plates, roses, scattered as if it were Valentine's Day. But Daniel now saw it differently. Every detail was not romance, it was a stage, and Elena was ready to deliver her final performance. She moved gracefully between the kitchen and the dining room, humming softly, her silk dress trailing like smoke. On the counter behind her, a small vial sat open, its contents already emptied into one glass of wine. When she carried the glasses forward, her hands did not tremble. Her smile was flawless, practiced, almost reverent as she placed one before him. To us, she said, her voice warm but edged with something he finally recognized. Finality. Daniel forced a smile, lifting his glass. His heart pounded against his ribs, but Ethan's words echoed in his mind. Play along. Let her believe. The rim touched his lips, the poisoned liquid glimmering inches away. Elena's eyes locked on him, hungry for confirmation, for the sip that would seal his fate. Daniel tilted the glass, letting the wine touch his mouth but not pass his tongue. He lowered it slowly, making a show of savoring. Perfect, he murmured, meeting her gaze. Her lips curled into a satisfied smile. Cold, triumphant. They sat in silence, the air thick with tension. Elena carved her lamb delicately, every motion controlled, her eyes flicking back to his glass as if urging him to drink more. Daniel pretended to chew, swallowing nothing but dread. Inside, his chest burned, not from poison, but from rage. The woman he had once called salvation was nothing more than a predator. Elena leaned forward, her tone dripping with affection. See, doesn't it feel good, Daniel, to finally let go? Her words lingered in the air, chilling him. He raised the glass again, masking his terror with a smile. The game wasn't over. Not yet. Ethan was waiting for the signal. For now, Daniel kept playing the devoted husband, while across the table, Elena watched with the certainty of a woman convinced. She had already won. The candles still flickered on the dinner table, their soft glow now mocking in its intimacy. Daniel placed his glass down carefully, his hand steady despite the storm inside him. Across from him, Elena leaned back, her smile faint, eyes sharp. She was waiting for weakness, for the poison to take hold. But instead, Daniel spoke. Elena, he said softly, almost tenderly, how long did you think you could keep lying to me? Her fork stilled midair. The smile faltered. What are you talking about? You, the names, the debts. Victor. His voice hardened, each word a nail. In the coffin of their marriage. I know everything. For a moment, silence, then her laugh came, brittle and sharp. You're delirious. It's the stress talking. Or maybe the wine. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the hallway mirror, just enough to signal. From the shadows beyond the dining room, Ethan and two plainclothes detectives stood watching, recording every word. Elena, Daniel pressed, his voice breaking now. Did you ever love me? Even once? Something inside her snapped. She slammed her hand against the table, plates rattling. The mask of grace shattered, revealing raw. Love? Don't be pathetic. You were a mark, Daniel. A stupid, desperate man with too much money and not enough sense. I gave you exactly what you wanted, a fantasy, and you handed me everything. Her words hung heavy, venomous. Before Daniel could respond, the apartment door burst open. The mysterious man stormed in. Victor Novak, his face twisted with rage. "Elena," he barked. "What have you done? You said this would be finished weeks ago. Now we're exposed." Daniel's heart clenched. The shadows of suspicion were now flesh and blood. Standing in his home, Elena spun on Victor, her fury redirected. "You think this is my fault? You were supposed to disappear to stay hidden. Instead, you show up here and ruin everything." Their alliance crumbled in seconds, accusations flying, their greed and betrayal spilling out like poison into the EEA. Victor's fist clenched. "You always were careless, Elena." But before another word could be exchanged, red and blue lights flared through the windows, sirens wailing below. "Police." A commanding voice shattered the chaos as officers surged through the door, weapons. Elena froze mid-scream, her face contorted in rage, while Victor's eyes darted like a trapped animal. The perfect stage she had crafted collapsed under the weight of reality. Daniel sat motionless, the world around him breaking into shards of sound and color. He wasn't safe yet, but at last, the truth was undeniable. And as the handcuffs clinked shut, he realized the nightmare wasn't ending tonight. It was only beginning. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale air, but for Daniel, it carried the weight of a tomb. Each day he sat there, thinner, paler, his strength returning only in fragments. What the poison had stolen from his body, betrayal had carved, even deeper into his spirit. At the center of it all was Elena. No longer draped in silk or lit by candlelight, she sat behind the defendant's table in a plain suit, her hands cuffed, her face stripped of charm. Yet even here, she tried to wield her greatest weapon, her eyes. She glanced at the jury with soft glimmers of vulnerability, tried to shape her mouth into regret. But the evidence was louder than her performance. The prosecution laid it out piece by piece. The aliases, the debts, the trail of men before Daniel. Each document, each witness chipped away at her carefully crafted image, and when recordings of her venomous confession played, her voice calling Daniel a mark, a stupid, desperate man, the courtroom stilled. There was no mask strong enough to cover those words. Victor Novak's testimony sealed her fate. Dragged into the light, he spat bitterly about their schemes, about how Elena always pushed too far, always made it personal. "She didn't just steal from them," he told the jury, his voice low. "She broke them." Daniel listened, numb, as if he were observing the story of another man's life. Once he had believed Elena's laughter was salvation. Now he saw it for what it was, a blade hidden in velvet. During cross-examination, Elena's composure cracked. She lashed out at prosecutors, at Victor, even at Daniel, hissing that he had ruined her, that without him she would have been free. The rage that had once been private now spilled into public view, her true self finally unmasked. The jury did not deliberate long. Guilty, on charges of attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy. The gavel fell, and with it, the echo of their marriage was buried. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. Reporters shouted questions about betrayal, about survival, about whether he still believed in love. Daniel said nothing. Later, in the quiet of his apartment, he stared at the empty glassware that still lingered on a shelf, relics of the night. She tried to end him. He thought of the poison, invisible but lethal. And yet it wasn't the substance that haunted him most. It was the memory of her smile, the way he had surrendered to it, trusted it, worshipped it. Love had not saved him. It had blinded him. His voice, barely a whisper in the silence. "The deadliest gamble is trust." He closed his eyes, not in peace but in acceptance. He would carry the scars forever, not just in his weakened body but in the knowledge that intimacy could be sharpened into a weapon, wielded by the one who promised forever. And somewhere, in the shadows of memory, Elena's smile lingered, no longer radiant, only venomous. The story was over. But the warning remained.